Alright, in this video I'm going to give you a quick run through of the interface, the main interface elements of 3ds Max and what they generally are used for and what you can use them for, just to get you a little bit more familiar with it, because I know that it can be pretty daunting when you first get into 3ds Studio Max to really understand what's going on, especially with so many icons and things hanging about. Okay, so let's work our way from the top and move on from there. So the first menu you see is the main menu. And the main menu is this area up here where it says File, Edit, Tools, Group, and so on and so forth. And it's pretty much a main menu like you would find in most Windows programs. So you have an animation menu here, graph editors, you can activate modifiers, and we'll talk more about modifiers in a future video in this tutorial. We can also create objects from the Create menu here. We'll see how to create objects a little bit further down the road. We have an edit menu where we can undo, we can copy and paste things and do all, well, we can move things and delete, not copy and paste, but we can do several things from here. Then we have a file menu, of course, where we can save as usual and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's the main menu. You can activate some help. You can customize 3D Studio Max's interface to your liking. Okay, and then here we have the main toolbar, and the main toolbar has a lot of different icons and buttons. You can undo and redo from here. You can activate movement and manipulation tools and a whole bunch of different things, which we're going to get into in more detail further down the road. But I just want you to have a look at this up here and pretty much have a general idea of what it's used for. And pretty much what it's used for is a lot of things. It's used for moving things around. It's used for selecting objects and things like that. And we'll get more into that a little bit further. Over here on the right, you have probably one of the most used tools. This is where you're going to be working in probably the most inside of 3ds Max. And this is the main command panel. And the main command panel is composed of several command panels that do different things. And if you hover over one of these different tabs for these panels, you get a little tooltip that tells you the name of that panel. For example, the first one is the Create panel. Now the Create panel, as the name suggests, is used to create primitives. It's used to create lights. It's used to create systems and all kinds of different things in 3ds Max. And we'll get more into that a little bit further down the road. The next panel is the Modify panel. Once you've created an object, you can use the Modify panel to, as the name suggests, modify the object in numerous ways. We can also use the Modify panel to apply modifiers to the objects in our scene, or whatever object we have selected or whatnot. And we'll get more into modifiers a little bit further down the road. We have a hierarchy panel over here, which allows you to change different things such as pivot points. It allows you to reset transforms and scales and different things like that. We have a motion panel, which is used mainly for animation. You can create keys as well as delete animation keys. You can change different things such as curve parameters and things like that, animation curve parameters and things like that. And we'll see more about that later. Then we have a display panel. The display panel is used to customize and modify the display of objects in the scene. For example, I'll show you very quickly here. We can hide objects by category. So objects that are considered to be lights, we can check mark that box, and all lights in the scenes will be hidden from view. We don't have any lights right now, so you won't see anything happen. This cube I have in my scene right now is considered by 3ds Max to be a geometric object. So it falls under the category of geometry. So if I check mark the geometry box, what happens is anything that's considered to be geometry in 3ds Max is hidden from view. In this case, the cube was considered to be geometry, hence why it was hidden. Okay? We have different options here. We can hide different things, like say select an object and click on hide. Then we can unhide all, or we can hide the object, click on hide selected, then unhide by name. So we can say select this object, which is the only object that's hidden, select it and click on unhide, and now the object's back in view. We can freeze objects as well. So freezing an object is different from hiding. Freezing allows the object to remain visible in the scene. But let me show you how that works. Let me select this cube. Then in the freeze menu, I'll click on freeze selected. Let me uncheck hide frozen objects. The reason it hid is because I had this object, this option that says hide frozen object selected. So let me uncheck that. Now you see the cube turns into this gray color. That's to immediately show me, look, this object right now is frozen. And what happens is when the object is frozen, I cannot select the object at all. I cannot select it no matter what I try to do. The only way to select it is to hit unfreeze all, or unfreeze that specific object. Okay. Then we have display properties. We can select an object in the scene. We can go to the display properties and we can change the way that this object is displayed. For example, we can display it as a box, which is just going to show a wireframe bounding box. We can also display the vertices of the object. So when I check this on, you can see the blue vertex marks on each corner. And we'll talk more about vertices once we get into components further down the road in this tutorial. I can also make the object see-through. So now it's semi-transparent, as you can see. And so on and so forth. So there's some options here to let you customize how you view objects in your scene. And you can customize this per object, meaning that you can make one object see-through, you can make another object wireframe, you can make another object frozen, and so on and so forth. Then we have over here this little hammer icon, which is the utilities panel. The utilities panel gives you access to utilities, plugins, different things like that. Now 3D Studio Max, if we click on this button here, you notice that the standard utilities, it comes with a lot of utilities. You can see this is a long list of utilities that you can use for all kinds of different things. You have utilities for doing camera tracking, utilities for collapsing modifier stacks, utilities for a lot of different things, more things than I can name at the moment. You can also add utilities. So if you say if for example you download or you purchased a plugin that some third-party company made for 3ds Max, you can install the plugin, and whoever made the plugin, they can make it work with the utilities panel, so you can load it up from here. We can also add more buttons to utilities, because we can see that right now we're limited to only 9 buttons in the utilities panel. Well, we can add more. If I go to the total buttons property here and say I add one more button, so now instead of 9 there are 10, I can scroll down here and you can see there's an extra blank button down here. Now right now the blank button has absolutely nothing, which is why it's blank. But if I wanted to, I could say take this collapse utility here, left click, drag and drop it right on top of that empty button, and now that button becomes the collapse button. So if I hit OK, you notice here now we have this collapse button right here that we can click to activate, and now we can use the different options here to go ahead and collapse the selected object or do whatever we need to do. So that's what you can do with these different utilities. Then I can hit close down here to close that out, and we're back to the regular utilities panel. Okay. To undo that, I could simply come over here and click on sets and click on max default. What I can do though is, because I customized the utilities panel with this new collapse button, I can click on save and I can save this configuration out for use later. But I'm going to go ahead and click on this drop down box and click on the max default, which is the default 9 buttons, and now watch what happens over here in the utilities panel. If I click OK, the collapse button goes away, and now we're back at the max default utilities panel layout here, which just has 9 buttons by default. Okay, so that's what the main command panel has. A lot of different tools and things that you're going to be using quite often in 3ds Max. Okay, moving on. Down here we have the animation controls. Down here we have the time slider, so we can use this time slider here to move the time forwards or backwards. We also have down here this time track, or this timeline, which we can use to see at what frame we have different keyframes at, and we'll see more about that afterwards once we get into animation. Down here we have the status line. So what happens is in 3ds Max, whenever you do something, 3ds Max is going to give you some information down here in this area. So for example, I have this cube selected, so 3ds Max recognizes that and it tells me, okay, one object selected. So I know I have one object selected. If If I click an empty space with the left mouse button, I deselect it, and now 3ds Max tells me you have none selected. You have nothing selected. Okay? Now if I select the object, you notice down here it says click or click and drag to select objects. So if I click, I'll select objects. If I click and drag, I'll select objects as well. If I change tools, like go up here to the main toolbar and click on the select and move tool, for example, now the little message changes. Now 3ds Max is telling me now you can click and drag to select and move objects. So now I can click and drag and I can move the object just like 3ds Max told me to. So that's what the status line can be used for. It's pretty useful actually. Right here we have the coordinate display, and the coordinate display allows me to input numbers that control the coordinates for different things. For example, now I have the move tool selected and activated, so I can go ahead and move this, say, 10 units in the z-axis. So the z-axis, as you can see from the manipulators, up and down. So I just move this cube 10 units up. If I were to put a negative number like -10, now the cube is going to move 10 units down below the grid. Okay, so I'll just put in 0 to put it back to where it was before. So you have access to the X, Y, and the Z coordinates. Okay? Moving on, over here on this lower right section here, just before we get to the viewport controls, we have a ton of animation controls. We have a couple of ways that we can set keys for animation in 3ds Max. We have auto key mode, and when we click that, you'll notice that now the active viewport is bordered and highlighted in red to let you know that you're in auto key mode. I can also click on set key mode, and now again we're in red, so 3ds Max is telling me, look, you're in set key mode. And then you have the keying button, which allows you to set keys for whatever object it is you're animating, a character, whatever it is. So I'll click on that again to deactivate the keying mode. Okay? Over here we have some more playback controls for animation. So if I hit this play button, you notice the time slider here is moving forward. And by default it's going to loop over and over again. So when it gets to the end, it'll pop back up at the beginning and continue to go over and over again and loop again and again and again until I make it stop. So I can hit this play button again and now it'll make it pause. To the left over here we have the previous frame button, which allows us to move a frame at a time backwards, or I can use the next frame button, which allows me to move a frame in time forwards. I can also use the go to end button, which is this one right here, which fast forwards all the way to the end of the timeline, and I can alternatively use the go to start button to move to the beginning of the timeline automatically. Of course I can click and drag the time slider, and these little arrow buttons on the sides here can be used to move the time slider in one frame, frame by frame, forwards, or frame by frames backwards in time. Down here I can also set which frame I want to move to exactly. So say if I know for sure I have to move to frame 75, instead of dragging the time slider, I can type in 75, hit enter, and now the time slider, as you can see, moves to frame 75 automatically. Over here we have the time configuration settings. If I click on that, I'll open up the time configuration options window, and from here we can change different things. Say the frame rate, we can switch from NTSC to PAL or to film frame rates or whatnot. We can also change the way the time is displayed. We can change from frames, we can change it to different time modes, so I can see in seconds or in minutes what time I'm at or whatnot. I can also change the playback speed. I can have it play back in real time. I can have it play back in half time, so it goes half speed, or a quarter of speed, so it goes in real slow motion. I can also move it at twice the speed or 4 times the speed, so it's going to move super fast. I can also change the timeline. For example, right now by default the timeline goes from 0 to 100 frames, but you can set this to whatever you want. So if I wanted to, I can set this to say 3,000 frames, and now you can see down here my timeline goes from frame 0 to 3,000. So let me just put it back to default. Hit OK, and there we go. So that pretty much covers in a nutshell the interface and the different elements of the interface, and pretty much what you need to know to get a little bit more familiar with the interface and a little bit more comfortable. Because the sooner you get comfortable with the interface of 3ds Max, the sooner you're going to be able to be more productive and start working on your projects. So that does it for this video.